There is no greater feeling of awe, despair, exhilaration in Dune Awakening than being eaten by a shy halud. In the 60-plus hours I've spent with developer Funcom's open-world survival MMORPG, I've been swallowed by the sandworms of Arrakis exactly twice. Both encounters were moments I will never forget. Dune Awakening is filled with these kinds of moments, ones where the desert around Arrakis becomes the star, and the player merely a small actor. Whether it's crossing the open desert sands and narrowly escaping sandworms, or piloting an ornithopter for the first time, Funcom makes author Frank Herbert's iconic book feel real in a way not even Denis Villeneuve's Dune films managed to accomplish. Dune Awakening is nothing if not ambitious in that regard, adapting an infamously difficult-to-adapt masterwork of science fiction with confidence. Though it eventually becomes repetitive, its endgame lacks direction, and its strict adherence to the source material is sometimes an Achilles heel, Dune Awakening nonetheless manages to carefully mix and match genres to create a spice cocktail that is hard to put down, at least for the first few dozen hours. Dune Awakening takes place in an alternate timeline from Herbert's story, one where protagonist Paul Atreides is never born and Arrakis is turned into a battlefield between House Atreides and House Harkonnen, giving Funcom just enough creative breathing room to take creative liberties and deliver some surprises over the course of its main story. All of this is on display in the game's opening moments. The game's character creator is presented as a Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother Gom Jubbar interrogation, Funcom's take on one of Dune's most iconic scenes. It is here where you'll not just only choose your look, but your backstory and social status in the Dune universe. You'll also choose a starting class, Mentat, Bene Gesserit, Swordmaster, or Trooper, though Funcom smartly doesn't lock players into these roles. Everyone can unlock access to each class tree by completing a series of quests from various trainers, though some trainers are easier to reach than others. At the end of the character creator, you are then given your mission to find the Freemen, the oppressed indigenous population of Arrakis that has gone mysteriously missing. One ship crash later, and you find yourself on the surface of the inhospitable desert world Arrakis with nothing but a scrap metal knife and rags for clothes. The sun wants to kill you. The bandits want to kill you and take your water. Hostile patrol ships dot the skies with searchlights looking for you. And the worms want to swallow you whole for daring to walk across the open sands. In its opening hours, Dune Awakening plays like a typical survival game, albeit a polished one. You gather resources, craft items, and build shelter. There is at least some overarching direction, as the game directs you to craft certain items and gather required materials necessary for surviving life on Arrakis. Funcom smartly revolves nearly all of Dune Awakening's survival mechanics around the need for water. You need to stay hydrated and stick to the shade, as staying in direct sunlight for too long will quickly cause sunstroke that, if left unchecked, will result first in dehydration and then in death. At first, you will likely be barely scraping by, harvesting dew from tiny plants and extracting, and if truly desperate, drinking the blood from enemies in order to survive. But it's not too long before water becomes less about survival and more of a currency. Items start requiring water to be crafted, and soon, efficiently gathering water becomes a core gameplay loop. To build better items, you need a bigger base, filled with more item fabrication machines and more water, which in turn require more power. Now, typically, I'm not a fan of base building. It's my least favorite aspect of games like Fallout 4 or Valheim, a chore I often feel like I have to do in order to get to the good stuff. Dune Awakening, however, makes base building extremely simple for those who want to do the bare minimum, though at some point solo players will need to invest the time and energy into making and powering bigger structures in order to make higher-end gear. Walls, roofs, and floors all connect together rather seamlessly, and there's no need to run power cables to various machines. Fuel for your base is easy to come by, and things, by and large, just work. In a smart innovation, bases can also be saved as shareable blueprints that can be easily reconstructed in a different location later with the press of a button, saving you time down the line. It's after these first few hours that Dune Awakening begins to come into its own. There comes a point around this time where you'll inevitably need to cross a large body of sand. That is, of course, where Dune's iconic sandworms live. And carelessly sprinting across the open desert is a surefire way to attract their attention. While normally death in Dune Awakening is a relatively low-risk affair, only resulting in the loss of some held resources and currencies, both of which can be reclaimed by returning to your site of death, as well as some item durability, getting eaten by a Shai-Hulud holds bigger repercussions. Dying to a worm means losing everything on your body at that point in time. All your armor, weapons, resources, money. All of it. And there is no way to get it back. That gives some real stakes to crossing the desert, a feeling of danger that never truly goes away, even after you've crafted your first vehicle. A feeling of progression and mastery over a harsh, untamed land is something that Dune Awakening does especially well. While you start in nothing but rags, it's not long before you'll find or craft a suspensor belt, allowing you to more easily climb or fall from higher elevations thanks to anti-grav technology. A few hours later, you'll be able to craft your first sand bike. Suddenly, the world of Arrakis opens up. Funcom pulls this magic trick again dozens of hours later once players have accumulated the resources to make their first flying ornithopter. Once again, the game changes dramatically, and previously inaccessible or hard-to-reach areas are now just a short flight away, making for more efficient resource gathering and faster traversal across Dune Awakening's main Haga Basin map. But those same vehicles can also lure you into a false sense of security. Both of my sandworm deaths happened when I was using my bike. One time was simply because I was careless. Following some of my friends across the sands on their bikes, I saw that the worm was close by, but decided to press my luck, thinking I could reach the nearby rocks in time. My sand bike could not outrun an angry Shai-Hulud, and I lost everything, including my bike. To say I was devastated and frustrated would be an understatement. It is worth noting that Funcom is well aware of how soul-crushing getting eaten by a sandworm can be, especially when it means losing a vehicle. On my first sandworm death, I was presented with a freaking vision, after which I was given the chance to recover my sand bike just this once. I accepted the offer, only to die by a sandworm again a few hours later. This time it was because I drove into a patch of quicksand. As I thrashed about trying to escape, the worm came and ended my suffering. Thankfully, I was able to save my sand bike before death by storing it in what I can only assume is some kind of pocket dimension using the game's handy vehicle backup tool. One of the extremely few instances in Dune Awakening where gameplay convenience overrides established Dune lore. Crafting higher-end recipes requires finding different materials found only in specific regions of the map, encouraging you to slowly progress through the world. Unlocking those crafting recipes, in turn, requires intel points, which are gained from leveling up and finding intel hidden inside enemy NPC encampments. As someone who likes to clear out a region of the map almost in its entirety before progressing to the next, I found I often had more intel points than I knew what to do with. Aside from gathering resources and base building, this is the core loop of Dune Awakening. Survey a region, clear out enemy camps, gain intel, learn crafting recipes, make better gear, and progress to a new area. Rinse and repeat. It's a loop that sustains itself for dozens of hours, even if combat isn't Dune Awakening's strongest feature. Using lore-accurate slow blade attacks to penetrate enemy shields is always satisfying thanks to the game borrowing from some of the visual and audio cues from the most recent Dune films. There are also ranged weapons in the form of various dart guns that come in pistol, assault rifle, sniper, shotgun, and minigun varieties. It's all fairly basic in terms of its actual gameplay. There is a stamina bar, a parry button, and short-range dash, but it gets the job done. It's the presence of shielded enemies who are nearly invincible unless dealt with in the proper way that manages to keep encounters from quickly becoming boring. Even if you do end up fighting what feels like the same handful of enemy types, in extremely samey looking cobbled together structures over and over. It certainly feels like Funcom, in staying true to Herbert's lore, ran into the issue of being unable to deliver greater variety when it came to Dune Awakening's enemies and locations. There are no thinking machines, or also known as robots, in the Dune universe, nor are there aliens or outlandish monsters, with the exception of sandworms. This is one of Dune Awakening's greatest weaknesses, and one that also translates to its dungeon-esque Imperial testing station dungeons, all of which feel nearly identical. While Arrakis is brilliantly brought to life, Dune Awakening is exhausted within 20 hours, even if major milestones like gaining a new type of vehicle or a new major class skill do inject some new life into the equation. Aside from its main quests, trainer missions are where most of Dune Awakening's narrative takes place. I wish Dune Awakening had more of these types of quests, as most of the game's other quests are relegated to walls of text and accepted from mission boards found within the game's various NPC outposts. It doesn't help that these mission board quests and a number of trainer quests are often nothing more than MMO filler. Go here, kill 10 slavers, go to this spot, pick up this item. While Dune Awakening's main story missions do deviate from this formula, it's still disappointing that so much of the game's questing feels like busy work. The game doesn't skimp on rewarding you for your time, as you gain XP and level up for gathering resources, exploring new regions of the map, or defeating enemies, rewarding skill points in the process. As a result, early on, you will likely have more skill points than you can use because you don't have a way to access the trainer you are looking for. This does hamstring the feeling of character progression in the early to mid game, and it would have made more sense to have the first class trainer for each class more easily accessible at the start of the game. Dune Awakening does at least let you respec your skills with almost no penalty, with the exception of a 48-hour cooldown, allowing you to invest points for the time being and then experiment with different abilities. It's a shame then that those class abilities, ones that players have gotten accustomed to and experimented for dozens of hours, become largely forgotten in Dune Awakening's heavily ornithopter-based endgame. Once players can create an ornithopter, they have access to a new map called the Deep Desert. Though the layout of the Deep Desert map changes weekly, it's where the game's best crafting recipes and most valuable resources, including the largest amounts of Dune's spice, can be found. You need a lot of spice and other materials to make the game's final tier of gear and base facilities. To call it a grind would be an understatement. Until recently, almost all of the Deep Desert was a PvP-enabled zone where other players could battle over resources. That largely resulted in large guilds or groups of players using their ornithopters to bully solo players from the air, thus making ground-based fights using the game's melee combat or third-person shooting practically non-existent. To its credit, Funcom has at least realized that having Dune Awakening's endgame be almost entirely controlled by roaming helicopter death squads isn't a fun experience. As of a recent patch, around half of the Deep Desert is now player versus environment, allowing solo players or those who don't want to engage in PvP a chance to gather some endgame resources, though the largest quantities of them are still found deeper in the PvP-enabled area of the zone. While Funcom has addressed some of Dune Awakening's endgame issues, its largest problem still stands. There is simply not much point in grinding for dozens more hours to acquire thousands of spice and endgame materials. There is no endgame raid or difficult PvE challenge that requires, or at least would be made easier by, having the best of the best gear. In the Deep Desert, you are largely doing exactly what you've already been doing for hours in the Haga Basin. Unless you are looking to get an advantage in PvP, there is no carrot on a stick for continuing to deal with Dune Awakening's repetitive, grindy, and pointless feeling endgame. I imagine most players will quit shortly after having completed Dune Awakening's main story and arriving at the Deep Desert. But that doesn't mean all the hours prior to reaching the endgame aren't worth experiencing or aren't enjoyable. Funcom has churned Herbert's legendary sci-fi planet of Arrakis into a captivating video game setting. Part story-driven RPG, MMO, survival-based builder, sci-fi helicopter simulator, and third-person shooter, Dune Awakening is a multi-headed hydra of experiences that somehow coalesces into a largely satisfying whole. While it suffers from a serious lack of variety when it comes to enemies and activities, and its endgame as of writing is a largely pointless endeavor with no real goal to strive for, Dune Awakening nonetheless succeeds at bringing the universe of Dune to life in a way never before seen. When the spice is flowing, it's easy to lose oneself to the rhythms of Dune Awakening's desert for hours at a time. Just take care not to attract Shai Hulud.